So afternoon, I know we'll keep things hopefully exciting and interesting for everybody as we're moving into the afternoon. I just want to thank Tyler for putting the time and energy and bringing us all together for these couple days. So thank you for that. So yeah, thinking big with content production, and I think after hearing Melanie and Benton's talk, I think what I'll present will help maybe kind of bring some of what they talked about into a real world scenario, and I think then specifically for some of the outdoor companies that are represented here in the audience. So we may kind of see some of what they talked about in real world scenarios. So these are 3 feature films, documentary films that I've put out into the world. And you can see that they're actually packaged. So a big piece of content is actually a brand and a product unto itself. There's actually energy put into these bigger projects, and since they are kind of packaged as its own product and brand, that really allows things like Netflix and iTunes and Amazon and theatrical screenings to kind of become a reality for projects like this. Just out of curiosity, has anyone in the audience actually seen one or more of these films? A couple? Do you recall where, what channel or where you maybe saw one?
Would it be like a Netflix or Amazon?
Netflix or Amazon? Same.
One was at a public screening and one was on Netflix.
Okay. Very cool.
Ride the Divide on my roommate's training for that. So
Nice.
he had that on TV like a week ago.
Gotcha. So the reason I ask is because, again, for discoverability, these bigger platforms, I think, are also, discovery platforms, much like, YouTube is a platform. So, but being in, these bigger platforms, I think, hold a bit more sort of legacy, what I'm calling legacy content. And these are just some other examples that I thought I would throw in there. Free solo within some other genres. Free solo with climbing, The Art of Flight with snowboarding, The Endless Summer with surfing. And interestingly enough, this film was put out into the world in 1966. And if you go to iTunes documentaries right now, this film is still ranking in the top 100 documentaries in iTunes 52 years later. So talking about legacy with a bigger piece of content, that's kind of what I'm talking about when you package a particular project in a bigger way. So yeah, legacy content, I think it holds a higher level of relevancy in the audience or consumer's mind. And these, if a film is successful, that remains relevant for years or decades, it's not necessarily by design, but I believe it's really born out of a pure passion by the filmmaker. I know Benton's kind of hero projects are very, very, very detailed and scripted and designed and tested and successful that way. But I would say, these sort of hero films are really kind of become hero films and legacy films and engaging because of the passion that a particular filmmaker has put into this particular project. And then sometimes they become lightning in a bottle. You had mentioned that you just saw, like your most recent film that you saw was Icarus. Did you say?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Again, same roommate had it on.
Right on.
When I got it.
Do you recall, can you kind of reel off the synopsis of it, or do you want me to?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's just like the intricacies of doping within sports at the highest level, and like we collectively are like, oh, there's no cheating that goes on, but then when it's like, you take in a nutshell, the host country builds all the buildings, the host country provides all the structure for it, and then also is the people behind what's going on, the conspiracy that's going on.
So it blew apart the whole Russia doping scandal for like the Summer Olympics. And the reason I kind of call it lightning in a bottle is it started off as one thing and turned into something else. So it started off with the filmmaker wanting to kind of replicate the Super Size Me of like, instead of eating McDonald's for 30 days, I'm actually going to really dope and see as a sort of amateur mid-pro cyclist and see if I can actually get better at endurance road races. So that was the thesis for this film. And going through that of actually doping, he was introduced to one of the main Russia doping doctors, and through that relationship and filming and different things, sort of uncovered the whole Russia doping scandal. And that's, if you recall, like the Summer Olympics, when Russia got totally lambasted and a bunch of Russian Olympians had to like cancel and different things, it was because of the work of this film at that time. So to me, that's lightning in a bottle, where you go out to produce something and it becomes something so much more massive than you had intended. A legacy piece of content is not necessarily features and benefits like some of these short pieces of content might do. It feels like a real feature film. They have strong stories that elicit emotions and engaging characters. And I think for our outdoor community specifically, it creates a very strong sense of wanderlust and emotion and an emotional connection. And I think as we get into it, what it also allows is hundreds of individual pieces of content to be created and published that really surround this main legacy piece of content. Why is your roommate training to do the tour divide race?
Because
He's a masochist?
But he has just been kind of into gravel and stuff, and he used to do rock climbing, like multi-pitch, like camping on the ledge type stuff. So now this is just kind of the next chapter.
Gotcha. So I think, somewhere along the way, that sort of sense of wanderlust, gets under our skin and kind of makes us do emotional things. So as far as a return on investment for one of these bigger pieces of project, is it worth the cost and effort? And can you really measure the cost of a feature-length film as a brand or someone partnering with a filmmaker to create one of these? So I want to kind of go through a few different stories about this idea. So this is Billy Rice. Billy lives in Bryan, Texas, and he tells this story. Him and his wife were sitting on the couch, cruising through Netflix one evening. They come across the film, Ride the Divide. His wife was just going to watch it for a little bit. She sits with him the whole entire time. She kind of gets sucked into it, and as the credits are rolling, he says, my wife turns to me and says, "So when are you going to do this race?" So he was a cyclist, but he had never really taken on anything like that before. The next year, he did the race and finished it. I believe the year after that, he had a custom titanium mountain bike built. Let me kind of back up. So the Tour Divide race is which the film Ride the Divide showcased back in 2008, is a race from Canada to Mexico along the Continental Divide. It's an ultra-endurance bike packing event, not for the faint of heart. It was kind of one of the earlier bike packing races that really kind of kicked off, and I think now there's bike packing races all over the world. But back in the mid-2000s, this was kind of the pinnacle event. So sorry for not throwing that context in there. So Billy goes back now with some custom gear. He does the race, he finishes it, he turns around and he goes back from the Mexican border back to Banff, and he's the first person in the world to yo-yo the Tour Divide route. A year or two after that, he builds a custom tandem bicycle, and him and his 16-year-old daughter do the Tour Divide race and end up finishing it. So there's some other elements here. So to that, can you really measure the return on investment that Billy, seeing this film on Netflix, and over the next 3 or 4 years, what kind of, I guess, for the marketers and brands in here, how much money did he kind of pump into the industry from seeing that film with his wife on the couch? This is Brian Steele. One other quick story, same deal. Well, first off, Brian Steele is a monster suit actor in Hollywood. He's the Predator. He's the Terminator. He's the werewolf in the Underworld vampire series, and he's the robot in the new Lost in Space Netflix series. I don't know if any of you have kind of seen that, but Brian Steele is the guy inside these suits, and he tells the same story. One night in Calabasas, California, flipping through Netflix, happens to see Ride the Divide. A year or two later, he buys custom moots, bicycle, all the gear, does the race. He cracks his wrist and ends up finishing the race with a cracked wrist. And then a few years later, my film Inspired to Ride, which is another mountain bike ultra endurance race, which covers the Trans Am bike race, which is from Oregon to Virginia across 10 states. So that was kind of the next film. Kind of saw the race roster start to fill out. Brian Steele's on the race roster. Billy Rice is on the race roster. And then, so these are kind of some films from there. But now what's happened years later, Brian and Billy are friends through this sort of community. Brian sells his house in Calabasas, California. Brian and Billy buy a piece of land in Salida, Colorado, which is on the Great Divide mountain bike route. Brian buys this super elaborate Airstream trailer, and now it sits up in Colorado. He's now no longer living in California. Their lives have changed. They're kind of have taken on this whole new lifestyle. Can you measure the return on investment that has affected these two people from happening to watch a film on Netflix? Just quickly here, this is the start of the Tour Divide race in Banff, Canada. I was up there after the film had premiered a couple years, and everybody I saw up there said this to me: dude, it's all your fault that I'm up here doing this. Again, because they saw this film that sparked an emotion and a sense of wanderlust. And again, look at all these bikes, all this gear. How many hundreds of thousands of dollars are these cyclists spending on gear and bikes, airplanes to get to the race, $500+ on food doing the route. So again, and can you really measure the return on investment that particular piece of content had? And really quickly, this was just a week ago. Ride the Divide is now 10 years old. This person had knee surgery and was watching Ride the Divide and says, when you can't ride bikes, you watch and cheer for those who can, and you do your PT, your physical therapy. And some of the comments in here was like, no, I just ended up spending far too much money on bikes and kit from that film, and that movie cost me a boatload of money. Wouldn't trade that memory for anything. Again, can you measure the return on investment on this film that's 10+ years old? And kind of, how many, I'd love to see a report of how much money people have bought on gear and different things because of films and content that have really elicited a response in them to become part of it. And kind of backing up into The Endless Summer, I thought this was interesting. I found The Endless Summer grew from a simple idea into a cultural product, a lifestyle available to anyone with the means for a ticket. Brown, the director, set out to sell a film, and in doing so, he inadvertently sold a dream. So again, this piece of content about serving and becoming, being a beach bum back in the 60s, kind of created that sense of wanderlust. And with the Art of Flight film, how many people went out and bought Travis Rice's, LibTech snowboard, and how many people booked their first hella trip after, watching a film like that? So I think, these films that really do elicit emotions and get under your skin, they start off aspirational. I aspire to be a bike packer or a heli-skier or a surf bum. But then once it gets under your skin, and if you're a masochist like this gentleman's roommate, it becomes part of your identity. I am a bike packer. I am kind of part of this tribe, part of this community. And I feel these bigger pieces of content have the power to do that. Oh, and then this is when content creates customer for you brand owners and agency folks. So a few of the brands that I worked with as part of these projects were Salsa Bicycles, Moots, which is a custom titanium manufacturer in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and Apadura, which is a bike bag manufacturer. So to kind of get into this next side of things is, brand plus filmmaker equals relevancy. That's kind of a bold statement. I think any of these brands on their own obviously have relevancy, but I think association or being involved with sort of a legacy style product, project, piece of content just adds a little bit more relevancy to that particular brand when, you can say, my product is on a film that's on Netflix or iTunes or in theaters or something like that. So when, brands and filmmakers get together, and if brands are open to outside ideas from content creators and filmmakers, and then engaging in unique ways and creating new paths to customer engagement, I think that's where win-win situations kind of really start happening. I'm just going to kind of quickly hit upon some of those relationships and how they, have potentially benefited a brand along the way in specific ways. So this is a younger, more svelte me back in 2008 when we did the film Ride the Divide. I was actually one of the participants, a racer. This is a Moots bicycle. Back in 2008, iPhone I think was just released October of that year. So as far as social media, and we use this word content, back in 2008, content, and I think Facebook was around, but not in a big sort of way. So a feature film or a film product placement was kind of a big deal or was a thing back then. So Moots is in Steamboat Springs, like I mentioned. Their headquarters is right on the Great Divide mountain bike route where the Tour Divide race happens. So I live in Denver, Colorado, so I thought it was kind of a no-brainer to get hold of Moots to see if they would like to participate in some way in this film. They were open to meeting, absolutely no money available to kind of put into the project, but we do have a demo Moots bike that we're open to, giving you for this particular project. We did get some support from Smartwool, who's also in Steamboat Springs, and when I say support, just this is a Smartwool jersey. Specialized gave us some helmets and some shorts and things like that. So from a product placement standpoint with Ride the Divide, we got no money from any of the brands or anything like that, but I will say for the next 3 years after the film was released, a huge percentage of the racers doing the route were on titanium Moots bicycles. So, and Moots recognized that, and I think in consecutive years definitely have been playing a bigger part in content and projects along those ways. And then with Salsa Bicycles, about that same time, they started also making titanium bicycles, and Salsa Bicycles specifically is kind of their brand is Adventure by Bike. Many of you are familiar with Salsa Bicycles. So they very early on really kind of took the mantra of Adventure by Bike, and bike packing was kind of, before bike packing had the word bike packing, they were definitely, I think, in that particular scene. And I'm just kind of not talking about the relationships of how I in particular kind of formed some of these relationships with these particular brands. As Ride the Divide was out in distribution and circulation, Salsa hosted a screening of Ride the Divide on their own accord. I had licensing the film to bike shops and other people, so people could host screenings themselves. Salsa happened to put a screening together, put on some talks and different things, sold out the Riverview Theater. We're like, holy crap, this is amazing. We kind of saw Salsa that same year, I think we saw them before this had happened, actually, at Sea Otter. We had showed the film at Sea Otter, and Salsa was there, and we kind of struck up a conversation, and that's kind of how that relationship started. And then this happened, and they're like, dude, if you work on another project, keep us in the loop. And that's where the second film, Reveal the Path, really kind of came into play, is striking up a relationship with Salsa. I kind of pitched them an idea. We went back and forth. I think they took me on a snow bike trip up in northern Minneapolis, I think, to vet me. And I must have passed with, and they got involved. So they financially kind of came into the project, and their financial participation probably covered 40% of the budget of this particular film. But what really started happening is the back and forth between the filmmaker and this brand really thinking through integration of this content utilized into their ecosystem. I just had this as kind of a half-page ad that they ended up kind of putting together from a shot of us in Switzerland that you can kind of see coming to theaters, etc. Reveal the Path kind of went on to go through its same thing of full distribution with on all the main platforms, and I'll get a little bit more into some of the other tactics, but I thought it was important to also kind of say Salsa did have continued to pay attention to their tribe and their audience and their bikepacking community. And then after Reveal the Path, the Tour Divide race, the Great Divide mountain bike route, had just continued to become more popular and more prevalent in the bikepacking ultra endurance race community. And they specifically created a new bicycle called the Cutthroat, which was their Tour Divide inspired bicycle. So as I'm not saying Ride the Divide was 100% responsible for growing the Tour Divide race, but I think it definitely played a significant role in the early days, much like Never Summer in the surf world, continued to get people excited about surfing in the 60s and 70s. So as a brand paying attention, they specifically created the Cutthroat, and interestingly enough put on their down tube the actual Tour Divide route with sort of the key cities along the way. So put energy, effort, design, and money into specifically creating something that they saw and had paid attention to that was growing within this particular niche in the industry. And I think the content that we helped them with Reveal the Path and all the theatrical screenings and them partnering with bike shops across the country hosting screenings of the film, Reveal the Path, just kind of helped them continue to kind of grow and be known within this particular niche as they put energy and effort into this particular project. The third film, Inspired to Ride, the relationship with Apidura, Tori Fahey is the owner of Apidura, and I had actually formed a relationship with Tori a few years prior. I won't go into the details. It was business related, but as this third film, so the Trans Am bike race, which follows the Trans America Bike Trail from Oregon to Virginia, as I knew that would be my next project, I reached out to Tori to see if she wanted to be involved from a financial standpoint, but she says, hey, I'm actually starting a bike bag company, and I think it would be really interesting from a timing perspective. Is there a way that we can work together, with the bike bags and this particular film? So from a win-win scenario, I think this was a perfect storm for Apidura. So I said, absolutely. So I, again, looked through the race roster of the Trans Am bike route, bike race, and I identified probably 6 to 8 of the athletes that I was aware of or that I thought had the endurance or the stamina and the pedigree to complete the race and complete it at a high level that they would be featured in the film. So we kind of were able to get Apidura bike bags placed on a lot of the key athletes in this film. And when the film released, it was perfect timing. They had their website together, all their infrastructure in place, and they just blew up as the film released. Everyone was like, who the hell are these guys? And it absolutely worked for them. So, and as we're out filming not only the film, but we're taking a ton of still photographs and everything else. So this is one of the most, kind of the iconic image from that film with Apodura. This is a pivot bicycle. Pivot and backing up, a Canyon bicycles. We had no relationship with them. So again, from a brand standpoint, Pivot partnering with Mike Hall from a sponsorship, Canyon partnering with Juliana from a sponsorship. They got massive lift from being in this film with their bike brands. Filmmaking side, we didn't profit. We didn't really get any support from those particular brands. So, but they probably supported got lifted as much as Apodura did from a purely organic standpoint as the film is out in the world. How are we doing? So, how would a brand or an agency really kind of work with and partner with a filmmaker if you have an idea or if you want to kind of create something bigger? But I would also say, do you want to kind of partner with a filmmaker who have the relationships and can get the project into these sort of legacy platforms like a Netflix and an iTunes and an Amazon, and who can get out there and get the film into theaters across the country? So I think given a lot of, there's some amazing filmmakers and videographers out there these days, and but not everyone can kind of get to the next level and package a branded film, a film that is actually has a product sort of feel to it for these platforms. So with that, how would you find someone who can get that film into those legacy platforms? And I would say, as a brand or an agency, start doing your research. Go to imdb.com. This is The Art of Flight, and start looking at the producers. And this is now some research that you can start going into and reaching out to people. You need to be aware some of these producers aren't necessarily producing the film. They just have a producer title, maybe because they put some money into the film and they get a token producer title. But more than likely, a lot of these field producers are absolutely producers who know what the hell they're doing and can accomplish what it is that you're looking to do. Vimeo on demand is a lot of excellent films in here. You may not see some of these films on iTunes or Netflix, but they're still amazing. So if you in the search area type running or snowboarding or skiing or climbing, you'll start seeing some other films. So this is another great place to start doing some research of filmmakers who are packaging, feature length, quality, larger scale content. And then, pay attention to the film festivals, the outdoor film festivals, Banff, Telluride Mountain, the Yeti film tour just is, I think they're halfway through. I saw it in Denver. 6 or 7 films over the course of a couple hours in various genres. Who are those filmmakers that you could potentially partner with or reach out to? So I think, a main thing I really would love to kind of get across is, if and when a filmmaker pitches you as a brand or an agency, on a particular project, be open to that idea. Don't just say, dude, we've got no budget for that, so sorry, we can't help you. I would just kind of instill in you to be open to the idea and think through, how you could potentially integrate a win-win scenario for each other or with each other. And it may not be feature length, but it could be smaller or something to start with. And I think as these things in our pocket have become 4K, video recording devices. Quality content can happen in a very interesting way. And I think one thing that exists now that didn't back in 2008 are these, our Instagram influencers. And we were talking at lunch that a lot of people that we now follow on Instagram and Facebook are kind of have a hero celebrity sort of status, even though they're out doing just sort of regular events and things like that. So, I think that could, is a particular stepping stone, is to, who partnering with, someone who kind of does have that, I wouldn't say status, but who is out there, putting out content, living their dream, and part of the tribe and the lifestyle that you or your brand particularly represents. Now, the project might totally flop, or it could ignite a whole new niche within an industry, hence bikepacking and the Tour Divide race, or become lightning in a bottle like our Icarus film did. And from a cost perspective, what do some of these bigger films actually kind of look like? I would say from the feature film side of things, we're in the $50,000 to $500,000 range. So, we're kind of at Benton's hero sort of project kind of standpoint with the feature. Now, obviously, Benton and his team are putting a ton of effort into scripting and testing, and they're hiring actors and DPs and studios and wardrobe and everything else. So for a similar, in our documentary world, a similar budget could realistically net you out a feature-length documentary film that, is out there on iTunes and Netflix and theaters and whatnot. On the smaller side of thing, a short film or episodes or episodics, again, highly produced, or in the $5,000 to $50,000 range. And when I say highly produced, it's to make it feel like a feature film. The video is all getting color corrected. All of the music needs to be licensed and or created from scratch, and all sound effects added, and everything goes through sound design. So there's a lot of extra costs associated with making it feel like a real feature film. And then creating a particular kind of deal with a content creator or a filmmaker. It could be strictly just product placement, free product like Moots was able to do with the Divide film, or maybe a pay to place like Appadura bike bags on multiple athletes. Or maybe you're just giving product for giveaways at the theatrical screenings. The events that we put together, we do try to make them an event. We do try to make them feel like a film festival where, booths are set up. I'm sure Asheville and other cities, have the Warren Miller ski films and the snowboard films. So potentially you're involved on the back end side of things. But then if you're actually involved from a monetary, kind of standpoint, from an investment standpoint, are you commissioning a whole project where you own it outright? Or are you, setting it up as a loan? I'll loan you $50,000 for this particular project, but we want $50,000 plus whatever maybe back as the film makes money, and then, or maybe there's just a small percentage ownership of the film for X amount of money. We retain 20% of whatever the film makes over the course of its life. So as I kind of say with that, you could potentially make this investment back from partnering with a filmmaker on these sort of legacy projects. And some of the main ways that it's possible. Netflix, we all kind of, Netflix sits up at I would say, near the top of the food chain. And that's very hard. A filmmaker needs to have a relationship in place to get a deal on Netflix or your film placed on Netflix. That's not an easy feat. iTunes, it's doable from a placement cost. So $1,500 to $2,000, we can get our project up on Netflix. It needs to go through some quality control and closed captions and a few different things, absolutely doable. Amazon, DVDs, Blu-rays, etc., or on demand, very easy. Vimeo on demand, very easy. Google Play, easy. Television, again, another is a little bit harder channel to get into. Relationships need to be in place. Theatrical events, absolutely easy to do. It does require quite a bit of marketing and effort to get people to actually show up to your event and to your screening, but that's where, again, where the partnership comes into play. So Salsa Bicycles really utilize this theatrical event to their advantage, working with their salsa dealerships across the country, partnering with them to bring the Reveal the Path film to their city and put an event together. That particular bike shop is hosting a salsa sponsored or salsa presented feature film. So there was a lot of win-win in bringing people and community and customers into the fold with theatrical events. So there's definitely, that's I think a very key scenario. And then website merchandise. Shopify, we can now create our own sites to sell merchandise and DVD and digital downloads and all that straight from our own ecosystems, and potentially even partnering onto your existing brand websites, pulling things into there. So from a return and a real return on investment, these are the channels that's absolutely possible to make that happen. And with the Icarus film, if you happen to invest in the film in its first iteration of when it was just going to become about this guy, doping and seeing if he could do it, I think it was like a $250,000 budget. So if you were an investor on that and it turned into what it did, Netflix bought it for $5 million. If you had a % ownership of that, you're probably sitting pretty good. And the reach is well over 100 million, households. A lot of you had said that you had discovered Ride the Divide on Netflix. 100 million plus households, just I think on Netflix alone worldwide now. It takes a lot of manpower and effort to kind of pull off, but more importantly, your brand may have an association with a project that sparks a movement, remains relevant for many, many years, like Red Bull and Salsa Cycles has. With again paying attention and creating particular bicycles. We're kind of wrapping up here. Another 5 minutes or so, but kind of one of the things that we kind of promised is now how we kind of pay off from a content calendar. How can being involved with one of these legacy projects really kind of give you a year or so of content? And one sort of way to do that is document the journey. Gary Vaynerchuk kind of came up with that. So a feature film has really got probably a year life cycle from the filming of the project, the editing of the project, the release of the project, and then once it's out in the world, you're in a theatrical tour, you're getting reviews on iTunes and Netflix. So, and documenting the journey of that whole process is fairly easy content that you don't have to think too hard about. You're just explaining and documenting the journey of this particular project along its life cycle. And then while the filmmakers are out there making the film, perhaps you're giving them permission to do Instagram takeovers with your particular with your channel, stories, behind the scenes video and images while they're making the film. Kind of the just the who, what, where, why now. Hey, Mike, we're out here filming with killer DP Matthew. We just experienced a bear rolled up on us while we were getting this shot. Dude, it was like he shit his pants. So it's again documenting the journey of the process becomes content that's engaging and relevant, but very, very simple and easy to really kind of pull off along the way. During the editing process, we've got frame grabs and still images, quotes from various frame grabs and snippets. So during the editing process, which is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months for a feature-length project, you can still keep your audience engaged along the way as you're editing and showing little pieces of the process. And then once the film is out there, yes, like I said earlier, you're on a theatrical tour, you're putting contests together, you're partnering with your brand retailers, you're putting campaigns together, film festivals, audience reviews on Amazon and iTunes, you're showcasing. So after the fact, you could bring in podcast interviews with the athletes and the people who were part of it. You're creating blog posts of the experiences. So Apidura had probably a handful of the athletes write some blog posts as part of their adventure doing the Trans Am bike race. Again, with from an SEO perspective, that kind of can really kind of fall into place when the actual athletes are participating in some of the blog content on your platforms, podcast interviews, etc. So what are some? I'm going to go through some quick examples. So I kind of mentioned this is kind of a new app called Cinebody. It's an app on your phone. You can shoot video anywhere in the world if you're connected to Wi-Fi or cellular, and that video in real time is getting up to the cloud and then downloaded to your editor's editing bay at HQ. So say we're in Asheville shooting something, and my editor in Denver is getting this video in real time and can start editing pieces of content from an event, from a race, behind the scenes as the filmmakers are out shooting a particular story. And I think, as you guys are at, Sea Otter or something like that, when time is of the essence, if you're doing an interview with a brand or someone, your editor can start editing that content and get it up 20 minutes later, 30 minutes later. So now from some actually usable tactics we're kind of getting into here. So these are some of the frame grabs with quotes kind of put over them that we had created. Some behind the scenes of filming. Inspired to Ride ranking number 6 on iTunes when it was released. In the edit bay, as we started shipping out the first round of DVDs, full packed theatrical screenings, wallpapers, Salsa putting together some user-generated contests with postcards, user-generated video contest where people would submit a video of them on a bikepacking adventure and winning some bicycles and a grand prize of a fat bike trip with the Salsa crew up in Alaska. So again, utilizing some of these various pieces of content along the way to really engage consumers and customers. And a piece of content like this, Mike Hall was killed a few years after he appeared in the film Inspired to Ride. And from a legacy standpoint, kind of taking legacy to a whole new level, Mike Hall, now has legacy, lives on, within that particular film. So anyway. So from now, some just a few tactics. Now that you've put all this time, energy, and money into a particular project like this, from a funnel standpoint, how do you start, really kind of, capturing these audience and engaging with them? And it's specifically, capturing audiences within Facebook and YouTube ecosystems, landing pages, people who've engaged with your projects, people who've bought tickets for your theatrical screenings. You now have their email address. People at events and through contests, you now have user-generated data that you can follow up with. Bots, ManyChat is a product from a bot standpoint, and with text, there's this thing called lead digits, and I've got a video, which is the last thing to really kind of hit that home. And what kind of here is, now that you've kind of created all this content that you've put out to your tribe and to your community over the year, it isn't just content. How can you now, reach back out to them either through an ad or a Facebook ad, and it is by capturing audiences. Just really quickly, within Facebook, how do you create a custom audience, and any video that you have put up there, so people who've watched 75% of this particular video, and I think where this is key is if you are using like Melanie's idea of putting out a ton of different content on a daily basis, but then this feature film content is kind of scattered throughout this calendar. The feature film content specifically you can track by people who've watched X amount of this video, and then those are specific people within your audience who is interested in this particular feature film that you are part of, and then be able to not necessarily hit all the other people that you've kind of been in there. So I'm kind of getting into the weeds a little bit here. And the same thing on YouTube. You can very specifically track people who've watched the trailers and the video that you've put out on YouTube, and then very specifically when it's time to offer them your salsa cutthroat bicycle because they've shown interest, then this is a way to really kind of hit those specific people. So kind of thinking of that sort of funnel aspect is, for the Inspired to Ride film, it went out theatrically in a lot of situations where I wasn't there, where it was kind of hosted, where film festivals had it, but as a way to still kind of gather email addresses from all these people who've seen the film, where I wasn't there, I kind of had this idea. Hey there, this is Mike Dion, director of the film Inspired to Ride that you guys all came out to see tonight. I've got a really crazy request. I need you to pull out your phone. I know, which is bizarre because all good audiences have already turned their phone off and put it away, but I need you to pull it back out again, and I'll tell you why in a second. But first off, I want to say thank you for coming out tonight. I know you could be anywhere else in the world doing something else, but you chose to be here checking out a cool cycling film with all the other adventurers sitting next to you in this audience. Maybe give the guy next to you a high five. So as a thank you, I want to give a few of you something cool. Maybe it's a signed movie poster, a t-shirt like this, or a free DVD, and I want everybody to be able to see this really cool Q&A that we shot after the world premiere. So I want to send you a link to that film. But how do I do that? Well, I need you to text me. So now that your phone's out, I need you to text to the number 33444, and I need you to text the single word Inspired Film. You got that? So you're going to text to the number 33444, the single word Inspired Film. Now your autocorrect may want to turn Inspired Film into 2 words. Don't let it do that. That's bad. It won't work. So Inspired Film to the number 33444. Now as bonus points, if you take a picture tonight or a short video, put it up on your favorite social network and hashtag it Inspired to Ride. And we love to see Inspired to Ride up on the marquee and lights, you guys hanging out with your friends in the theater, maybe a short video of what you thought of the film tonight, hashtagged Inspired to Ride. Okay, so finish up the texts, and as you're doing that, we've got a really cool 1-minute short video from People for Bikes that's gonna play after I'm done chatting, and then after that, the film's gonna play. So again, thank you for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you on the other side. So that was just something unique from a marketer standpoint, how we then collected email addresses and texts and things like that. And you can do that with short form content, text-ins, and now email addresses kind of come in. You can then start trickling out autoresponder emails now to those folks. And what was interesting is I'd be sitting at home and my phone would just blow up with, hey, all these texts that would come through. I'm like, oh, the film is screening somewhere tonight. And then I would text them back saying, hey, this is Mike the director. Did you enjoy the film? And they're like, no way, yeah, we loved it. Thank you so much. So again, just that interesting engagement and interaction can kind of go a long way. So that was my thing. Thanks for kind of sticking with it. I know it kind of rambled and went through a lot of scenarios, but hopefully there were some big ideas with some tactics that you could actually use.
Ah, stupid idiot!